One thing I find really useful when you're learning how to code with vanilla JavaScript or HTML and CSS is how to build out web widgets. So for an example, we have an accordion here, and I'm going to show you how to build this with CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. And understanding how to do some of these smaller widgets help you learn how to build larger, complex applications. Now, honestly, when you build a production website, you're going to be using some type of component library like Bootstrap or whatever else that you might need. But it's always important to understand the lower logic of how this is implemented and the intricacies of CSS and JavaScript. All right, let me just go ahead and show you how to build this. All right, so we have a blank file. Let's just go ahead and scaffold out an HTML file. And I believe that's an Emmet extension I have installed that allows you to do that. It might be built in the VS Code, I don't remember. But with this HTML scaffold, let's make a script tag. We're going to be doing all the JavaScript in here. And then let's also do a style tag in the head. And honestly, you could do both of these as external files, but it keeps it easier for me if I just keep it in one for a tutorial. So we're trying to build an accordion. So let's just first of all build out some HTML and style it a little bit. So I'm going to make a div here and give it a class of accordion. And underneath that accordion, we could just do another div. And we'll just put some content here. So we just need to put some placeholder text. So I'm going to go ahead and Google lorem ipsum generator, and that should give me a website where I can simply just generate a bunch of example text. So let's just click on 5 here, generate some lorem ipsum, and I'll just select the first 2 paragraphs. That should be good enough, and paste that in. All right, so now we have a div that has all the content, and then we also have an accordion. So let's make sure that this shows up on the web page. If we go over here, we see some lorem ipsum, and we also need to make sure that our main accordion tab, I'm going to put like some topic here, actually has some text display. So let's style this a little bit so it looks a little bit nicer. But again, this isn't really a tutorial about styling. So if you want to style a particular class in CSS, you basically do a period and then the name of the class. So I'm going to say .accordion. And then inside of these curly braces, which are required for the syntax of CSS, you can start adding properties. So let's just go ahead and give this accordion a height of like 80 pixels. And I want to go ahead and make the text that's inside it like vertically aligned. There's different ways you can do this, but I'm going to use flexbox. So I'm going to say display flex, and then I'm going to say align items of center. So at this point, if I save this file, I should see that some topic is centered on this accordion header. And the font is really small, so we should probably also say font size of, I don't know, 40 pixels again. That should make it look a little bit nicer. And then also give the user some feedback to know that this is an accordion. So we should probably give like a hover effect. So the way you can do hovering in CSS is you do the name of the class you want to apply the hover on, and I can do :hover. So anytime someone hovers on this element, it's going to apply some additional styling. So in this case, let's just change the background color to like a gray or something. So when they hover over this, make the accordion gray. And then lastly, I think the cursor should be pointer so that the user has feedback to know that, hey, this is a clickable object. And honestly, you could style this for hours, but I mean, this looks good enough for our demo purposes. The next thing I want to do is I want to give a class to this content. I'll just say content here. And I want to style this to give this a max height of, let's just say like 0%, so that it doesn't actually show. And I believe we might have to give it an overflow of hiddens, because right now it might not have a height, but the content is still being displayed. So I'm going to say overflow of hidden, save that. And now the contents of the accordion doesn't actually show up. So what we want to do is when we click on this header, we want to have the content show up. So one way you can do this is inside the script tag, we're going to make a new function called toggle accordion. So function toggle accordion. And we need to make it so that when we click on this top level div, the header div, it calls this function. So let's just do an onClick event listener. And let me just do that in double quotes. So if you are unfamiliar with how to do event listeners on vanilla JavaScript and HTML, you basically just put the property onClick, and then you set it equal to a string that has your function call in it. Okay, so we're going to have it call toggle accordion when you click on this div. And we want to verify that this works. So let's just go ahead and print out a console log and say here. Now when we click it, you'll see that here is printing out in our console. By the way, if you don't know how to open up your DevTools, right click on the page and click inspect. That'll pull out this DevTools thing, which is really important as a beginner because you have access to looking at the console. You can also have access to a debugger or just looking at your elements directly. So the next step is we want to get access to the thing, the element that the person actually clicked. So let's just go ahead and pass this as an argument to this function. And inside of this argument, I'm going to put accordion. So if we were to print out accordion here, it'll be the actual DOM element called accordion, right? The thing that they clicked is going to print out in that function. So now that we have access to the accordion DOM element, we can actually try to grab the next element sibling. So I'm going to say const content is equal to accordion.next element sibling. And again, I always like to console log everything I do if I'm kind of doing something that's new or unfamiliar. So if I click it, and you'll notice that now content prints out. So we have access to the hidden content of that accordion inside of JavaScript now. So if you put your thinking cap on and try to think, okay, well, how do I dynamically change this to have some height so that the content shows? Well, you could just say content.style.maxHeight. And we'll just do something hard-coded for right now, but I'm going to make this more dynamic in just a second. So if I refresh this page and click it, you'll notice that it now shows up when I click this. So there's a problem with this. Now it won't actually collapse, so we need to implement the collapse functionality. And in order to do that, you need some type of component state. So we need to keep track of this thing is open or not. And the easiest way to do that is basically use something called a data set, where you can store random properties or key value pairs to know when something is expanded. So what I'm going to do is just say is expanded is equal to true. And I believe this might need to be a string. I could be wrong. But now what I'm going to do is kind of show you, if I click on this element, or if I hover over this element, you see that says data is expanded true, and that is being actually attached to the DOM element. So we can kind of use this to keep track of if this thing is expanded or not. So hopefully you understand conditional logic. How do we actually make this change from max height to 0 to 500 or vice versa? Well, we could just say if the data set is expanded is equal to true, do something. Otherwise, we could just do something else. So I hope that makes sense. This is just an if statement. Unfortunately, I think everything you store on the data set has to be a string, which is why I'm checking the string of true. But I could be wrong. There might be another way to actually store real objects or real booleans or numbers on data set. But from what I've seen, it kind of casts everything to a string when you store it. All right, so let's think about the logic a little bit. If this accordion is already expanded, then that means we need to collapse it. So I'm going to put a comment here and say collapse accordion. And then vice versa, we need to expand the accordion if it's expanded is false. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. This is just Boolean logic, and this is probably very important to understand how to do in JavaScript if you're lost at this point. But to collapse the accordion, really what we need to do is run max height or set the max height equal to 0 pixels. And then we can say is expanded is false. All right, so hopefully this will work. If I click it, it doesn't actually expand because we haven't implemented the expand accordion logic. So let's just copy this code and paste it down here. And for max height, we're actually going to put like 500 and expanded is true. So now I think we should be able to click it, and you'll notice that it goes up and down, but it doesn't actually slide. There's no CSS transitions. So we could try to work on that. But there's also another issue with this max height thing. If you have a bunch of content, you don't want max height to be hard-coded at 500. You want it to actually be the full size of the content. So a little trick is that you can do content.scroll height, and I believe that should expand it to the correct size. So I think I might need to add pixels at the end of this to see if it works. There we go. So that's a little trick. You can actually take the scroll height of the content div, and that's like the full height of what it would be if it wasn't already hidden with a max height of 0. So we could clean this code up. There's probably a lot cleaner way to do this if you wanted to split this out with some refactoring, but I think this is good enough for a beginner to understand. But now the next step is, how do we actually make it slide out with the CSS transition? Well, what you could do is basically on the content itself, you can add a transition and make that be a max height of, let's say, 0.5 seconds. All right, so what this CSS transition does is say if the max height property ever changes, make it interpolate the values over half a second. This could be like 2 seconds or, you know, really short if you wanted to, but I think 5 seconds is good in terms of user experience. And what we kind of want to do is if we go back to the page, this will expand out and in. So it's super simple to get this going. And now we actually have an accordion. So this is kind of how they implement it in Bootstrap. There's a lot of ways that you can do this. So let's actually verify that this works. If we have multiple accordions, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this a couple of times just to show you that this should work. Might need to expand this. I'm not sure why that keeps collapsing. Let's go down here and let's go ahead and paste this in a couple of times. Let's go ahead and copy this, and I'm going to go paste it in like twice just to demo like this will expand the different accordions. Okay, does that make sense? So now we have 3 separate accordions, and if you kind of look at their state, the ones that are expanded will have a data is expanded true on it, and the ones that aren't will have it is data expanded false. Now you can achieve this without using JavaScript, but it's like, I don't think it's a really good experience without using JavaScript because you have to like set a max height where you don't know what the real max height is of your element. You can do it with like transforms, like I believe you can do like a scale Y transform, but again, I think that animation just looks kind of weird because it makes your like text skew as it expands and shrinks. But I think the way I did it is actually like one of the more elegant ways. It just has to use a little bit of JavaScript. So if you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up because it helps my channel grow. Also, leave a comment below if you have a different way that you have done some type of accordion logic in your applications. This is just the way that I enjoy doing it, and we kind of learned a little bit about JavaScript and CSS transitions along the way. And like always, if you're new to this channel, be sure to click that subscribe button because I'm going to have other videos like this that should hopefully help you become a better web developer in the future. All right, have a good day.